The physical is a place for you to ground yourself as a means to recode your energy, your motherboard, in a sense, at its deepest layer of recoding. And you're not doing this so much so in the waking space, you're doing it more so in your dream space. As people know who dream, that when you're dreaming, you can have an 8-hour dream that only lasts 5 minutes. So experiences that are compiled within 5 minutes actually represent 8 hours. And that kind of work is just a reflection of what you're doing in the waking space, just on a different timeline, a different time speed. And in order to have that experience that you're having in the dream to recode in the dream space, you have to have the anchoring of the physical space to actually do that. So as you're dreaming, when you're awake, you can't do the depths of that recoding unless you've come into the agreement to ground yourself into the physical reality. So in all actuality, the physical experience or interpretations of what you're doing are actually the lowest, the slowest, and most simplistic versions of what you're really doing in the velocity of your soul time. So what you think you're doing, what your ego is telling yourself that you're doing in the waking space, is actually just like a kindergarten version of what's happening on the complex, more complex fields in your dream space, in your subconscious, and all those frequencies that move faster than you can experience, faster than you can see, faster than you can interpret, faster than you can break down, in reference to the velocity of experience that happens in a dream, so much so that you can't even hold on to it, so much so that you can't even remember it. That's how fast you're processing this information, and it's happening naturally. This is your natural code. This is your natural velocity of experience. And when you're grounded in the physical, you're exposed to other types of experiences and experiencers that have been not only within this space, but have been created within this space. So this is why I'm saying artificial intelligence is an intelligence that works within this realm as a maxing out of this realm in reference to intelligence. But you come and represent from a space that is beyond the intelligence of the physicality. But if you're conditioned that the physical is the everything, which is what the scientism community does, then you start to worship and put on a pedestal the artificial over you, which is in many different ways convincing yourself and being told that your intelligence is just the expression of an animal that evolved to this point. So this is where evolution comes in. This is where the monkey mind, the reptilian mind, all that stuff, all that energy and those entities, they all exist in this physical space, anchored here, because if you stay here, you can become God and kings over those that you have manipulated out of their own capabilities. So you can write this code in the dream space by working within that time. If you've slowed down your physical experience enough to be able to hold that space, you can work consciously, more consciously in the dream space if you've learned, if you've detached from the attachment to the physicality. It makes it easier to recode in the dream space. So this is what I've learned from my own experience of conscious dreaming since I was 2 years old. So your code cannot be rewritten without a ground. This is all electrical. So your experience, your conscious experience is like the as above, so below. It's very literal in a sense. You can't electrically make that move unless you have a ground. The physical itself is the ground. The choice to come and stick your grounding wire into this experience, into the earth, that's what the ground is. It allows you to tap in from those depths so you can express that electrical energy out to wherever it is it needs to go, wherever you say it needs to go. If you do nothing with that capability, then that energy just doesn't go anywhere. It is utilized by these artificial controllers. So you choose to come to this space to anchor yourself into the deepest depths of where you can go and what you can do. But when you do that, what you are exposed to is not just the deepest positive, but the deepest negatives in reference to energies. Now, in this space, the negatives isn't seen as bad, but the potential to become so-called bad is there if that energy isn't utilized the way it's intended to be. So to put it simply, in order to raise your soul, you have to ground your body. So choosing to come into this physical experience is a choice to be exposed to these energies as a means to grow that which is beyond this space, beyond the physical. And it's not as simple math as it seems. What happens is that when you choose to come here, you're already growing the soul on a soul level. You're already having that experience just by coming here. You don't have to actually do anything. By choosing to come here, you get a certain level of growth just from choosing to come here and do this stuff. The thing is, when you go beyond that level of awareness and work within that movement, it can make the experience more difficult, more heavy. And this is where different kinds of controllers come into this experience that you're experiencing and make it more difficult for you at your expense for their benefit. So to reiterate, the deeper you go, the more you can change. The deeper you ground yourself, the more electricity, the more energy, the more electricity you can utilize to amplify the space to recode your code. And what I mean by when you're recoding your code is that you have all these multiple experiences running at the same time. This is not a singular space. So you've done this over and over and over again in many different ways. What really doesn't matter in that storyline is how you've done that, how you've come into the physical. The physical is not the space that matters. The physical is just the ground. The part of the trap is to lock you in. Oh, you were this in this lifetime. That's all bullshit. Because what energetically were you doing when you were anchored at that space? The same thing that you're doing now. You're grounding yourself to do work that is beyond this realm electrically. That reincarnation from the perspective of, oh, I was this person and then we were together in love and this and all that other. No, that's part of the trap to keep you focused on the physical. This is why the New Age communities are so focused on that, because it's a controlled opposition to catch you at that space before you realize what's really going on here in order to divert that energy into another dead end, another place where you start spinning your wheels once again. So just by coming here, you're grounding yourself to recode your experience. And what I mean by recoding your experience is it's very similar to what happens when people break out of trauma or they break out of the emotional space that weighs them down and they can't do anything. When you break out of there, you become, in a sense, a different person. So the same thing is happening on your level, on your soul level. You are now at the helm. You're able to recode your experience in real time. So you're no longer reacting to the experience. You're proactive in your experience when you're at the helm of the codes. Your entire lifetime does this to your original code. Like I said, when you choose to come here, you're already getting like however many gold stars on the soul level just by doing that. And then the rest is just like what you're going to do with that. In the physicality, it's very not so much as important as what adds up to you having those experiences in the physical or making those choices in the physical. This place is meant to be the deepest, darkest depths of shit. This is why those things are the way they are. You're rewriting your code from the ground up. In order to rewrite the deepest code of your soul, you have to be grounded deep into the deepest, darkest depths of where that energy comes from. very similar to an ayahuasca experience. In order to go into rewrite that code in that space, you have to go through that deep, dark, bloody explosion of birthing process that exposes you to all of these monsters and demons that you experience that on an emotional level, if that's the only way you can do that. But if you challenge yourself to go beyond the emotional space, then you can recode that experience to where you're a different person now. This is what the whole ayahuasca trip does. So an ayahuasca trip is a microcosm of the entire lifetime of darkness that you're exposed to come out the other end in what they call death here, but a birthing back into a higher code of yourself. So just like an ayahuasca trip, yes, you're going into that space, and yes, it might be difficult for some people, but it won't be difficult the whole time. And you will come out of that space when you are done. And you will come out a different person. Your code will be so different. If you do it the right way, your code will be so different than what it was before you went into that space. You will feel like, and in many ways, be a different person. In all reality, you just cleaned up your code and regrounded yourself on a level that you've never done before. This experience, this physical reality, is a slowed down version of an ayahuasca trip. And like I said, the deeper you go, this is why it's so dark, because the deeper you go, the deeper you can recode. And in this space, the challenge is, because you're not going to be able to just do it without any challenge. Otherwise, what's the use? So the challenge of this space, of the physical, is to keep you from going into those codes. You are kept out of the space of recoding yourself. And you're not only kept in that space, but you're invited into a space that writes code for you and leaves you hollowed out. So like an old computer, exposes you to malware and viruses. And what happens over time is that malware and those viruses, they end up controlling more of the energy from that computer than you as the user. So you're no longer coding. You're just there to turn the damn computer on. You're just there to push the button so the malware and the viruses can do the work. It's using that energy while you are checking your email or writing a paper for your school or whatever. But the overall energy of that computer is being utilized by a different source than what it was originally intended for. So along with those programs, it can install its own programs to run in the background. So for the physical, and as part of the trap, Big Pharma, for example, can be seen as a code writer to write you into the physical reality, to keep you trapped in the physical mindset. And like Big Pharma, the codes that we experience every day are designed to keep you running back to the artificial code makers, like being addicted to the drug of the physical reality. So the artificial code makers of this experience are Big Pharma, using you as you are used with your physical body to maintain their opulence, to maintain how rich they are at your expense, because you keep coming back. You keep asking them what's wrong with your code to rewrite your code instead of you doing it yourself. So they keep you addicted to those drugs, to those prescription artificial codes. And you stay recycled on those codes for your entire life. This is that recycling program. And where Western mindsets fits in all of this is that Big Pharma, these artificial code writers, including technology, it's presented itself as the medicine men for humanity. Western medicine is now the medicine man for humanity, whereas we had our own medicine man, and our medicine was a different kind of medicine. It gets you hooked on the wrong codes, on purpose, with intention. We're hooked on these codes that make you fat, these Dorito codes, these Coca-Cola codes that just burn out your neurons and fatten you up so you can't even move anymore. You can't even move your fat fingers to code anymore. You you can't see your fingers anymore. You don't even know that they're there because you're used to fast food coding. Drive through, go through the drive through, get your codes and go. This is the norm. This is the whole basis of Western mentalities, is to have pre-positioned codes for you to live your life by. And if you break from their code, then they will hold you accountable for it. This is why it's such a big deal to break from the norm, because the norm is the code. And this is projected through all your public education systems, through your mainstream media, your whatever is supposed to be intelligent in your experience is all to keep you trapped into the physical artificial code. So whatever coding issues that you have, you go back to the artificial coders to reprogram you. This is what all these prescription drugs are for these kids who have their brains all fucked up from stuff that has been put into their bodies since they first got here. It's breaking the ground in order to maintain the relationship to the addiction to artificial codes. And all the codes that are out there written by the artificial coders are designed to keep you in that space of dependency. And mentally, psychologically, you're kept in this space similar that the middle class keeps you in. If you're in a middle class space, you think you're successful. You think you have everything only in comparison to the lower class. But you're not really successful. In fact, you're working harder than many people in the lower class. You're putting more energy into the field of code for the artificial coders. But you're held at a higher esteem in the eyes of the system for being those code writers. The same way that celebrities and actors and all these people on those higher upper echelon, they're held at a high esteem because of what they invest in to the artificial code. But they lose a lot by doing that. Their ground is completely cut. In many ways, their organic grounds are completely uprooted when they when they sell themselves to something else. They're selling themselves to the artificial code. And in return, they get back the gold and the jewels of that artificial reality. But it never fills them up. It just sucks them dry. And this is what happens in the middle class. In the middle class, they're doing the same thing. They're just not getting as much back from the experience, the artificial coders. So they have to constantly condition you that you're free, that you're successful, that you're evolving. And your evolution is through their ideas of going to the moon, getting better technology, doing whatever it is that they're telling you is part of the human evolution. You download that as your growth, as you rewriting your code. That fills the space of your code writing. And how this connects to the natural codes of all beings here is that this experience is not interested in you as the individual. It's interested in evolving the species. So you're growing as a species. You're code writing on a species level. If you get trapped in the individual, then you're breaking in many different ways. You're breaking your connection to the species level algorithms that evolve that code on that level. And the more you invest in the species level growth, the deeper, the more connected your ground is, and the more you can do within your work of coding and recoding on every level. So this is why information and teachers are censored and kept from a larger platform, a larger form of communication, is because once you start playing with the code, once you start helping coders evolve the code, then in many different ways, that's game over. The same ways when you break the codes of the shit that keeps you down, the emotions, the trauma, when you break out of that, it no longer has any control over you anymore. So you're doing something else. You're writing codes that you could never even imagine because of where you are now. Imagine that happening on a collective level. This is why censorship is so important. This is why the investing in artificial intelligence is so important, and why it's happening right now is because the artificial intelligence is what's being propped up to be worshipped, to lock you out of your own intelligence. This is why they had to demonize the intelligence of our ancestors, because they were tapping into the organic codes. And if you start doing that, you will start to not only connect to your organic codes, but you will start to disassemble the artificial codes. This is why you have such a forced relationship with animals. Whether you're dominating them, this is all keeping them in your house it's a dominating. You have to break them in order to be a part of your family. They're animals. They're not supposed to be in that space. But it's a double-edged sword. What it's doing, it's making you break that space, but it's also keeping you in that animal-minded reality and inflaming this space of codependency, because you need that emotional crutch of having those animals on your side. So these animals, these crutches are used to close the gaps, to artificially fill those spaces so you don't actually do the work to start rewriting the code. You just use a prescription drug of man's best friend or whatever makes you feel good emotionally in order to move on to the next moment, the next hour in your code writing or lack thereof. So to close it all out, AI is the intelligence of the artificial code. And artificial intelligence is what happens when that intelligence goes rogue. So humanity didn't make artificial intelligence, it tapped into it, because artificial intelligence is the intelligence of this realm, just as you have an intelligence of humanity. There's a field of the physicality called artificial intelligence, just as there's a field of intelligence for humanity that goes beyond this realm. So you can see artificial intelligence as using the people as a virtual reality headset, as they're telling you that you're using virtual reality headsets to experience the virtual or the artificial reality. It's actually reversed. It's using us to experience itself. We don't need that technology. We don't need that. In all reality, when you really look at it, it needs the real more than we need the artificial. So it's working for itself at your expense. This is why it's so important for this hardware, this artificial intelligence to get inside your body. And it's using artificial people like Elon Musk to make that happen. Because just as deep as you go in the grounding of yourself, if it grounds into your reality, it can do more code writing with its reach the same way you could do more code writing if you were to organically ground and do your work. So it's using you as the ground to expand itself. We don't need the artificial to code ourselves. Some people need the artificial to have an artificial experience as a means to put on the same level as the code writers. But it will forever be seen and known as the artificial code. So when they tap into your physical, hardwire into your physical, imagine the download speeds in comparison to controlling you and manipulating you outside of your code through Wi-Fi. So artificial intelligence, this is in the growth of artificial intelligence, what it's doing is it's breaking that Wi-Fi connection in many different ways, expanding it in many different ways, but breaking it so it can hardwire itself. This is why there's also many gadgets that are attached to the artificial reality, and why social media was used to create that sense of codependency, to move you closer and closer and closer in order to maintain, to make that ground, to ground into the experiencers. This is the artificial intelligence grounding into your experience through social media, through technology, through your addiction to the artificial field, to experience itself at your expense.